Good evening and welcome to Crawley Borough's Overview and Scrutiny Commission's meeting of the 3rd of February. I am Councillor Marian Ayling, Chair of Overview and Scrutiny Commission. There are no scheduled fire drills tonight, so in the event of a fire alarm sounding, please leave the building via the main spiral staircase and through the main reception doors. Once outside, please turn left and make your way to the fire assembly point located beyond the multi-storey car park in Exchange Road. If you are unable to use the stairs, please wait in the council chamber and you will be guided by a member of staff to the evacuation lift. This meeting is being live streamed by the council's YouTube channel. Please note there are no comment functions available as part of the webcasting. The council is the data controller and will retain the data collected during this webcast. This will be done in accordance with the council's published data retention policy. Any members of the public seated in the public gallery should be aware that by entering the chamber, you are consenting to your image being captured by the automated camera system. Recordings will be used for webcasting and or training purposes. Councillors are reminded to take note that what is displayed on the screens in the room is what is being recorded and webcast. Cameras are currently set to capture you in a seated position, so please remain seated when speaking. You can request to speak as usual in committees by raising your hand, to speak by pressing the button with the face on it, and the microphone will go green when you're live. We will now commence with apologies of absence. Have we received any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillor Hellier.
Thank you. Does any member have any disclosure of interest or whipping declarations? No. Now we come to the minutes of the last meeting held on the 13th of January. Does the Commission agree that the minutes are an accurate record of that meeting? Yep, thank you. There's no public in attendance, so we will move on. We will start with the Q3 budget monitoring report from Councillor Jones, Leader of the Council, Caroline Matthew, Head of Corporate Finance, and Vicky Bassley, Chief Accountant. Councillor Jones, will you introduce the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The report sets out the projected financial outturn against budget for 24-25. The overall revenue position, members of the Commission will have seen, has not changed since Q2, although there have inevitably been movements within the portfolios, and they're all detailed in Table 5.1 of the report. The outturn variance against budget is projected to be £412,000 more favourable than expected. Combined with £195,000 of earmarked reserves that are no longer required, this has resulted in a general fund balance forecast of £3.352 million. This is a significant improvement against budget. Members are aware of the £3 million minimum recommended balance set by the Council, and we continue to be above this level through no shortage of hard work. As mentioned, there are inevitably changes which are detailed in the report. The main areas of improvement from Q2 are in relation to the crate building, where we're £225,000 better off than we thought we would be. Waste and recycling income is £91,000 higher. Recoveries from ongoing benefits is £103,000. The main adverse variations are development control fees, which are now we estimate to be £321,000 lower, which is about £115,000 worse than we thought it would be in the previous quarter's forecast. This is simply because water neutrality continues to have an adverse effect on many parts of the council, and predominantly the planning fees that we don't get because the planning applications can't proceed to committee. this is something that's entirely out of our control, Chair. The planning restrictions are ones that are imposed by Natural England, and the council has to follow the law and indeed enforce it. So, the other thing that probably accounts for where there's been some adverse variations is the net interest on investments that we forecast has been reduced a little due to the revised cash flow forecast and high balances that are attributable to the HRA. Speaking of the HRA, the financial forecast for the housing revenue account has improved by £165,000. There is no change on the forecast for expenditure on reactive repairs, being 800,000 higher than the budget, but gas boiler repairs are lower than expected by about 108,000, and as I mentioned earlier, the net interest is anticipated to be favourable. The capital budget has been updated for the £2 million improvements to K2. I'd like to draw your attention to the current volatility around right to buy receipts. The reduction in the discounts was discussed at the last meeting of the Commission, but obviously the surge in applications that happened to sort of beat that deadline for the reduction is working its way through the system. No doubt this issue will raise its head again when we talk about the budget next on the agenda. And the only other thing to say is the reserves. The report includes a table of reserves at Appendix F, which are considered adequate. Thank you.
Thank you for that report, Councillor Jones. We will now open up to questions and discussion. Do any councillors have any questions, please? Some of the sections in the report refer to contract, lease and lease negotiations. Please, details relating to these items cannot be discussed in open session. Thank you. Councillor Lanza.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Jones and Finance team for this report. I've just got a few comments and questions to put. It is very interesting, the increase in right to buy activity reported on page 23, paragraph 8.13, and I appreciate the difficulty in putting in a financial projection on this, but based upon past experience, and we got 300 applications or so in the system, do we have any kind of handle on how many kind of applications we might have the capacity to process in a financial year, just as a kind of clue as to the workload and financial impact that might emerge from this? On the page 19, yes, there's some savings there. Sometimes we make a capital investment in some council services with a view, obviously, to making the experience better and also to improving the financial outturn. Do we happen to have, and you might not have it available now, the outturn for the nature centre, whether that be positive or negative at Tilgate? I just want to go to, just got a question, and on page 38. We could go to page 38. It lists the reserves, and amongst these, well, there's quite a few of them, which is understandable in local government. But one of them is a restructuring impact reserve. I think it's £400,000. Now, we're living in a period of uncertainty. 16th of December saw the publication of the devolution and local government reorganisation white paper. And local government reorganisation or devolution, they're only mentioned once in the entire agenda this evening. I did a search on it. It strikes me that if we can see a justification for a restructuring impact reserve of £400,000, which is largely an internally focused reserve, then the devolution and local government reorganisation is crying out for both a reserve and for a risk on the corporate risk register. It's some of those fundamental changes in local government I've seen in all my time here. And it's not all about, although it might deliver well, it should deliver. It should deliver cost savings in the medium to long term. There will be a lot of upfront expenditure, including for districts and borough councils, which might, in due course, cease to exist. It's not all about raking in the savings. There's a heck of a lot of work in terms of identifying assets, where they go, identifying liabilities, what's to be done with them. And it's not just cash, it's the resource that you're going to require to achieve that, possibly consultancy resource. Now, if I've missed it, I've missed it, but I do think we should flag this as both a risk and a need for a specific reserve.
I'm happy to respond on some of the political points and let Caroline answer on and Vicky on some of the more technical. I think it's I'll defer to the experience of the officers to a certain extent when it comes to right to buy. But one additional complication in the current surge in right to buy applications probably is that people who have put it in have probably not necessarily. Some of them haven't necessarily done it because they felt they were ready to do it, but they felt they had to put the application in now, otherwise they'd miss the larger reduction. So I think to a certain extent the overall percentage that will successfully reach the point that they'll go to a purchase could be lower as a result of that. In terms, I can't answer the question about the nature centre. I haven't seen the figures recently. There's still, Councillor Lanza's right, Chair, to refer to the uncertainty and to do with devolution and restructure. And I certainly think it's a good suggestion that it goes on the risk register. I would still just say basically it's still very early days in terms of what will be required for any restructure or local government reorganisation, and I'd also observe that there's very little money free in the system to allocate such a reserve either. It would be nice if there was this sort of significant money that we could put aside to cover these costs, but that money probably isn't there to a certain extent. I'll let the finance officers correct me if it is, but I don't think it is. And also, the detail of what will be required from us and what the government will be prepared to sort of fund up front, it just isn't there yet. We don't know, and I'm sure that's the case for all the tiers of local government at the moment that will be affected. So I think that's the best I can do in terms of what I know.
Yeah, so for the sort of right to buy figures, they are mentioned in the next report, which is the in the budget report. But borrowing that table, so if 150 came through, £200,000 on average, that would generate 300. Is that right? 300. Yeah, £300 million worth of receipt, which obviously is a significant sum. Having recently spoken to colleagues in the legal department, we will be looking for more resource to process these applications, because obviously they need to be processed as quickly as possible, to give us certainty and also to give certainty to the applicants. So that was the right to buy one. The Tilgate Park, are you talking about the current year or last year?
I'm really talking about the last year. Yeah. So,
yeah. Sorry. We'll
fine.
Give you a written answer for last year. And the third question, I've lost.
Risk register.
Oh, the risk register. Yes, I mean, I totally agree. It's something that we've got on the radar, but it's not. The risk is not mature enough to be quantified, to be put on the risk register. The first step will be whether Sussex goes through as a fast track. And I think that will be the point where we'll put it on there. And as also the sort of financing of it, that'll be another matter. Again, I mean, I've had some huge figures quoted about other areas, and that 400,000 that we have in our reserve is a purely inward-facing. If we need to do restructures, and it's an old reserve that's been there for some time, so that we can do, investor save type schemes.
Well, thank you for those answers. Just on the reserves point again, and I suppose it touches on risk. I don't think we should assume that any central government will fully reimburse us for the costs of local government reorganisation. And the most recent evidence of that is that we're not being fully reimbursed on national insurance, for example, by a country mile. But it's a smaller amount. But I just think we should be mindful of that. And we've got savings identified in the next budget report. It might be that we need to seek out more savings for initial one-off costs associated with local government reorganisation. I really think we should stay mindful of that. Thank you. And if necessary, some of those savings, might be used to create at least the beginnings of a notional reserve to help fund it. I mean, the LGA, Local Government Association itself, is already appealing to central government and making the point that the reorganisation doesn't come without initial cost. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Councillor Jones for his report and all the hard work of the finance team. I take Councillor Lanza's point about devoting some of the costs. It's not true then, Bob, that the Cabinet of West Sussex have been going around measuring up assets already for the district. So it's a joke, Bob, don't worry. It's a long way ahead. It's a long road ahead. I'm not saying it's a long way ahead. So, many bumps to come. Many bumps to come. So I think we'll wait and see. We're still waiting to hear about whether we're going to be accepted yet in the election. So we're all waiting for a bated breath on that one. Anyway, I was going to probably mention this in the next item, but just looking at, whatever savings we make here and there, it's a very large elephant in the room. It's the cost of homelessness. And just looking at these figures on 5.6.5, it's remarkable, isn't it, that in the first full year, last full year before COVID, our net cost of temporary accommodation was 262, and it's virtually grown exponentially by 25 times. And whatever we do, it's going to be tough. But there are some discussions on it on social media and elsewhere, and I just think. In 5.65, it says work remains ongoing to maximise income and reduce costs where it's possible. I think just as a member of the Overview and Scrutiny Commission, it'd be quite interesting what kind of governance and controls we do put in place to ensure we are getting value for money in such a difficult situation for us.
Thank you, Chair. I think you're absolutely right about the cost of temporary accommodation, Councillor Hilton. And you're also right to say that they're at extraordinarily high levels. Now, that's absolutely true. I mean, one of the slight ironies of this report is it if you read the budget report, it actually looks a lot more significant. But the amounts don't necessarily jump out in this report as much because, and one of the reasons is that it is around where we predicted it would be. So And one of the reasons it doesn't look quite as significant is that since last year, the overall costs we project are going up about, I think it's £80,000 or that sort of level. Not because our costs have only gone up by £80,000, but we've been a lot more successful since last year due to the greater successful recovery of our costs. So I think it's fair to say that the overall costs of TA have actually gone up by, I think it might be £1 million. I'd have to double check the figures, but we've the overall net expenditure of the council's actually had to incur has been significantly less because the officers have been able to get more of that money back, which I think is welcome. I think though that it would be a little unfair for anyone to say that the council hasn't tried to keep the costs low and do everything we can. But I mean, there's a fundamental point here that when people come to the council and they tell us that they're homeless, we assess them to determine what duty we have, and if they meet the government set criteria, then we have a legal duty to find them accommodation. There's no ifs or buts about this, and it doesn't even matter if the council doesn't have the money to provide it. That's a statutory requirement. We cannot control this, and as this is a government standard, and it's a legal duty. So the huge rise in temporary accommodation costs is down to a combination of factors that are outside of our control, and they stem from all sorts of things: water neutrality, the cost of private housing, which certainly hasn't been going down, to government policy, and the consequence of these factors is huge pressure on Crawley and TA. Now we have phenomenal pressures, probably some of the highest in the country. And I do meet other council leaders who, from time to time, tell me they're staggered by the levels that we're experiencing in Crawley. You know, it's far in excess of many other areas. I would say though that in terms of people sort of saying, oh well, you know, what are you doing to try and find ways to bring the cost down? Well, I would say much of the efficiency in terms of acquiring temporary accommodation and not paying over the odds locally has already been done, as far as that is possible. But when you have overwhelming numbers, that in itself creates problems that isn't always possible to absorb the cost implications as much as any of us would hope. But we're also doing all we can to prevent homelessness, including supporting people in private housing, so they don't fall into temporary accommodation in the first place. And we're working very hard to prevent parental evictions where there's relationship breakdowns and things like that. Central government's come to Crawley, I have to say, to look at how we operate and held us up as an example of best practice in much of our preventative work. And because we were really keen as well for central government to come in and look, you know, to see if there was something that we perhaps could be doing. But no, we were sort of one of their most experienced civil servants came in, went through everything and said, well, I can't give you the exact words, but basically said, you know, there's nothing here we can tell you to do. You're doing it. So we are doing what we can do, but I think the message fundamentally, Councillor Hilton, is that change needs to come from government, and we have been and we are continuing to lobby for them for this. The officers are having regular meetings with the MCHLG's homelessness team to review progress and performance against our homelessness and rough sleeping strategy, and feedback that we've received highlights that we have a robust performance management approach on this. The service has recently been audited as well, and there's no significant concerns or recommendations for strengthening controls over and above those in place, which are already there.
Thank you, Councillor Jones, for such a comprehensive reply. It sounds like, as we say before, it's a perfect storm of high demand and quite low and expensive supply. Thank you for your answer. Appreciate it.
Okay, I have some questions on 5.7.1. It's about Tilgate. And I just wondered if you could tell the numbers that is declining by, and is it a result of price change? Because if it's going up more than people can afford, then maybe that's the numbers are coming down because people can't afford to go there. And I just wondered if maybe it might be worth lowering the price to make more people, you know, you might only make 5p, say, but if you're doing 25p's, it might be more than...
Sorry, Chair, we're just having a quick discussion.
Because it says on the 5.7.1 that there's a lower income than the budget had in
It wasn't.
Delays to fee increases.
That's precisely what it was. It wasn't. We don't believe it was because the relatively modest increase discouraged people from using it. It's just that there was a delay in actually implementing the increase in price. So if it had been implemented at the time that it was originally intended to, we'd have got the income. It's not. So basically, for the months we didn't actually increase the charge. That accounts for the shortfall, basically.
So it's not because people weren't visiting?
No, I think it was good news for some of the park visitors because they got cheaper parking when they went for the period that we didn't do it.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Also, 5.8.1, I'll come back to, don't worry, I'll come back later. I'll send them as a written one. I've lost what part of it is. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I will do, and so begin the process of scrutiny and challenge to reach the decisions that we will have to make at the end of this month on the budget for the forthcoming financial year, and set the council tax. Now, the council has faced significant financial challenges over the last few years with service pressure due to the exponential rise in temporary accommodation that we've been referring to, and as well as pay and price inflation. The local government settlement that was published on the 18th of December and we received final confirmation of today was not as favourable as we might have hoped. We got £300,000 less grant funding in cash terms. The government has, however, given us more overall through other sources, such as the recovery grant for less wealthy councils, a £1.426 million grant from DEFRA for the extended producer responsibility for packaging scheme, and additional grant funding for homelessness over and above what we received last year. But the new burdens funding for the increase in employers' national insurance contributions, Councillor Lanza referred to it earlier, will only be partially funded, adding nearly £500,000 of continuing direct cost pressures. So despite these challenges, the council has managed to deliver a balanced budget for 25-26 with a welcome modest contribution of £140,000 to the general fund. And this forecasts the general fund to be at around 3.5 million at the end of the 25-26 financial year. Now we need those sort of levels of reserves to stay in sort of prudent and secure, relatively secure territory. But actually to be at this level where we're above 3 million, I think is an impressive achievement, and it's something I think we owe a significant amount of gratitude to our finance officers and our senior officers, senior management team for helping us achieve and or at least be confident of achieving by the end of the next financial year. Chair, we are proposing a council tax increase of 2.99% or £6.94. That's an increase of just 13 pence per week in terms of the borough share of the precept, which represents, in my view, exceptional value to businesses and the public for the large number of quality services that are provided by the council. The draft budget meets the council saving targets for 25-26. Members will remember that identified in the budget strategy in November, we were looking at full year reductions totaling £2.134 million, and we've achieved that through £1.784 million of savings, including additional income, and the removal of £350,000 to the renewals fund's contributions. A full list of service proposals are contained in section 6.18 of the report, and the budget assumes a small reduction in the net cost of homelessness due to the additional grant funding that's been allocated. However, as has been alluded to earlier, the gross cost is expected to continue at £10 million per annum. There is still a risk of the continuation of the Home Office grant funding, as this has not been formally confirmed, and that comprises about £2 million of that overall sum. However, the messages we've got from government would indicate that is going to continue, but we've not had the official confirmation. So until we do, we won't write it in. General fund reserves are considered adequate, but continue to be under significant pressure, as we established. Addressing the HRA, the spending plans for Crawley Homes are contained in Section 8 of the report. It is proposed to increase social and affordable rents by inflation 2.7%, which is inflation plus 1%. The full effect of the inflationary increase in dwelling rents has not been realised for 25-26 due to the recent changes in the right to buy discounts, which have resulted in a significant increase in the number of tenants wishing to exercise their rights under the scheme. It's extremely difficult to predict the actual numbers that will go through to completion, but that will have a significant impact on rental income annually for Crawley Homes, and the budget assumes an £864,000 reduction in income. Although it has been responsible to repay loans from the Major Repairs Reserve, this will no longer be possible from 25-26 when the council will have to take on new borrowing. The work on the updated HRA 30-year business plan is nearing completion, and that will be very much helpful in terms of providing us with far more certainty in planning ahead for the budget. Addressing the capital programme, the council has a comprehensive capital programme of £82 million for 25-26, which comprises of £36 million from the general fund and £46 million from the HRA. All the detail is contained in the Appendix E of the report, and that includes the £2 million that we recently voted for the health and fitness improvements at K2 that we announced in December 2024. So, Chair, I've been through the numbers and I've given a high-level overview of the finances. Let's now address the policy decisions that have been made which underpin the proposals. Given the scale of the budget gap, we've had to make savings in this budget. This is not something that we want to do, and in making the savings, we're having to cut some services which are well run and which provide real value to the town's residents and businesses. No one is trying to pretend otherwise. But we have shielded these services for as long as possible over the years, and the temporary accommodation pressures mean that is no longer entirely achievable, although we've done what we can. We've been through a process which has enabled us to look at every part of the budget. We've identified statutory and discretionary spend, as well as some of those non-statutory but still essential services, which if we were to cut, we would still need to buy in order to operate as an organisation. Through this process, we prioritised areas of discretionary spending for officers to look at, to develop proposals and identify where savings could be made. In addition, we've also looked at statutory areas and whether we can deliver differently to be more efficient and save money. Proposals are included in the budget report to do this, such as changes to how the environmental health team operate. We have tried wherever possible to protect services for the most vulnerable. We've looked at how we can run services differently, including, when necessary, getting external expertise for enforcement on litter. We've also looked at who should pay, and in services which are not universal, have chosen to pass on more of the cost to the person using the service rather than spreading the cost across all residents through council tax. Despite all of this work, Chair, we are proposing savings in our community service, neighbourhood services, sustainability and economic development. We're making the difficult decision to decommission our outreach play service and decommission specialist bowls and croquet provision. We also aim to use our car parks better and increase income through paid for parking, while continuing to keep the overwhelming majority, and I stress that, the overwhelming majority of parade parking free. Our other proposals are set out in the report. We've been consistent with using what the public have told us in the recent consultation are their priorities. They've told us that they want public protection and safety prioritised, and for the appearance of the town and the upkeep of the street scene and our neighbourhood services to be maintained. We could have gone further in making savings in these areas, but did not do so to better reflect the views expressed. The public also told us fairly decisively that they also believe that people should be paying nearer what the services cost to be provided, which we've also reflected in how we've approached this year's budget. Happy to answer questions where I can, Chair, from the Commission, or to refer to our senior officers in finance where their technical expertise will assist further. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Does any councillors have any questions? Councillor Ramsey.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just have a couple of questions around the same kind of area, 6.19 to 6.20. Specifically on 6.20, I'm just wondering how this figure next to litter enforcement has been arrived at, because on the face of it, it seems quite optimistic, and I guess what none of us want is for it to be too optimistic and for further cuts to be needed. And I'm just wondering, where did that figure come from?
I think the officers might be able to give you a bit more detail in terms of that, but in terms of how that figure's been reached, it reflects what the salary saving plus the anticipated revenue from fines would be.
So I understand we're outsourcing the littering. So presumably, I guess my question is why haven't we been getting these savings before? Because presumably we have been enforcing. I mean, extra action is always welcome, and if it is just a case of we're just ramping up extra action and this new company are going to be able to work much more efficiently, that's great. But it just seems 170 grand a year just seems a lot of extra litter caught, I guess. So essentially, has any research gone into that figure, or are we just kind of hoping?
Thank you, Councillor Ramsey. I can answer that because I've been involved in these proposals. So the 170 figure is based on is based on research and based on what we think we could bring in. We do litter enforcement, but we don't. It's not. In terms of the work that the team do, there are other things they focus on as well. So things like fly tipping, environmental crime, and so on. So we don't maximise litter enforcement income that we could be getting. When we have done targeted litter enforcement, the sort of revenue we bring in suggests that the 170 is not an unrealistic target over time. In addition to that, you'll see a saving in the table above in 6.19, which is the outsourcing of the litter enforcement. So there's two figures there. One is about income and one is about saving, so staff saving, but by sort of reducing that team in order to outsource. And the purpose of that is also that at the moment, we've got a relatively small team that's doing lots of things. What we'd rather do is have that team focusing on things like fly tipping. And when you get a specialist provision in, they would resource as appropriate in order to deliver the contract. So it may be they have more people in particular times. They have a sort of flexibility which enables them to generate income which we wouldn't have if we've got sort of a few permanent staff working on it. So we think it's a reasonable estimate, and we've tried in all of these estimates not to over egg it, because we don't want to be in the position that you mentioned, Councillor, where we're sort of later on in the year having to try and claw money back because we've not met those targets. We think it's realistic.
Cool, thank you for that. And my other question is just about, it's also in 6.19. It's just about Crawley Museum becoming financially independent. I'm just curious as to what that might look like in practice. Like, have we consulted with Crawley Museum specifically on what that might look like? I assume it would mean like charging for entry, but I don't know. I'm just wondering like how fleshed out is that at this stage?
I think some of these questions will be for Crawley Museum. In the council's defence, we've been very supportive of the museum over the years. I think the original agreement was that Crawley Museum wasn't going to be receiving anything by this point, and that's not something that's happened. And indeed, what the council's trying to do this year and next is having actually a stepped reduction. So actually, the museum will continue to receive some support. It will go down year on year, but it won't be left with it won't be left in the next couple of years with nothing. What that does, hopefully, is it gives the trustees a chance to build up alternative revenue sources. I mean, I pay tribute to the museum. I think they do some marvellous work. I don't particularly want to see them charging. I think that this gives them an opportunity to look for alternative grant funding, and that certainly is around, I think. And I have been talking to a few of the trustees who I know are very committed, and we will obviously continue as a council to try and support them how we can. The only problem is as the pot we have diminishes, we have to inevitably make some tough choices, but at least they've got some breathing space to actually do the right thing, and we are committed to the museum continuing, because there is a fairly strong condition which Councillor Lanza will remember from the Heritage Lottery Fund, that we continue to run it as a museum, or we have to hand quite a lot of money back, and we're not going to do that. So we will try to do whatever we can, but I think we've tried to play really fair with the museum. This has not been something we've dropped on them. We've talked about this, and we'll continue to work at having a good relationship and to see what we can do on this.
Cool. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Jones. And yeah, that's all my questions.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this report. Can we just go, please, to page 45 to begin with, and paragraph 5.1. Now, Councillor Jones mentioned the government funding situation, and let's be clear about this. There's a reduction of 309,000, isn't it, pounds in general grant funding from government. And Councillor Jones mentioned the allocation of the recovery grant, but as per this paragraph, the reduction in the funding guarantee is greater than the allocation of the recovery grant. And similarly, we're being under reimbursed for the direct cost of the national insurance increase. So we estimate that it's going to cost us £722,000, but we're receiving from government just £200,000 for a gap of £522,000. But that generates a question, because I'm kind of reading from the report that this is about direct national insurance costs to the council. What about where we have contracts with third parties, commercial third parties, and VCSE third parties, that's voluntary community and social enterprise partners, because those organisations will be fully impacted by the national insurance increase, and therefore our cost of services should increase where we have contracts with external partners. And so if I could have a comment on that, please. And on the savings, I mentioned that in this report there's 4 types of service identified in the search for savings. They're statutory, income generating, discretionary and essential. And those are the areas that were looked at, or to use Councillor Jones's expression that he used several times, those are the areas that we looked at. And I suppose that invites a question, who is we? Because the level of savings, and let's look at them please on page 53. It's not just the level, it's the nature of the savings. I mean, they really are very substantial. And in the past, on Crawley Borough Council, we've had a considerable degree of cross-party member involvement on much lesser sums than this. We're talking about 1.8 million in full year reductions in the base budget. And we have had in the past a budget advisory group with cross-party membership. So again, who is we? And what's striking about the report is that naturally enough, we're presented with those savings suggested for approval. But what's invisible, what we cannot see here, are those savings that we, whoever we is, discounted. So I think we should have sight of that. In the interests of public scrutiny, we should have visibility of those savings which didn't make the cut for this report, especially in discretionary services. I think our public would want us to prioritise statutory services, add essential services, and indeed income generating services over discretionary. But our public cannot see those savings that were discounted by a group of people not known. And so that's not a good thing. And when we look at the description of the savings themselves, and I'll pick on one, but there's others. Page 53, the bottom, neighbourhood services, changes in the service standard delivered by patch teams, £185,000. Well, that's a substantial sum in its own right. I think we'd like to see a bit more detail about what that actually means for communities. But there are others similarly which I think are probably open to challenge as well. So, and also, yeah, community engagement would be another chunky sum, £179,000, what that means in practice. And I'd like to go to page 59 next. And so on page 59, we've got the capital programme and we've got 4 financial years and then we've got future years. I don't want to labour the point. I don't want to sound as though I'm enjoying making the point, but the fact is, if local government reorganisation goes ahead, you only need the column up to 2027-28. There isn't going to be a future year for this particular local authority. Page 66, a specific point on the taxi licensing. So this is Appendix C on page 66. And we see there's a proposed increase of 5% for taxi licensing, generating an additional £18,000 per annum of income. I think it's a general understanding, including through the Local Government Association, that this particular account should operate on a break-even basis and shouldn't be subsidised by the general fund. So it generates a question, with that 5% increase, what is the projected outturn on the taxi licensing account? And those are my observations and questions for now. Thank you, Chair.
I'll cover the points I can, Chair, and then I'm happy for the officers to cover any of the more technical aspects I miss. But we can quibble over how much the government has or hasn't given Councillor Lanza to a certain extent, but I suppose it depends on what you count. And to a certain extent, I count pound for pound in terms of what we get. And overall, we're getting more this year than we got from the previous government. And I did set out how I worked that out. Yes, we overall we're better off through such things as the recovery grant, the homelessness grant, and the extended producer responsibility grant. That's money coming from somewhere. It doesn't necessarily mean it's from the block grant that the MCHLG gave us. Now, I'll absolutely concede that the government's adjusted the minimum guarantee that it gave last year, and it sort of called it a funding ceiling this year, I think, and that has seen the reduction that you referred to. But I mean, I would argue that overall, if you look at the overall amount, the money that the council has received has increased, and that's obviously been welcome in terms of us reaching the figures that we have, which obviously have helped stabilise the council's finances and keep us respectably above the £3 million minimum reserve that we were aiming to keep to. In terms of the final settlement, actually, it's gone up slightly. We're going to get just under £250,000 in terms of money towards covering the national insurance costs. But ultimately, I don't disagree that the council will have to pay quite a significant sum to cover that additional amount. Although saying that, let's bear in mind that all the national insurance contributions that are increased are going to go towards public spending, so there will be a benefit for the public sector overall in due time, and it won't all come from this council. I'll have to defer to the officers about how the costs for the contractors' national insurance will be borne. Councillor Lanza asked about who reached these decisions. Well, ultimately, the paper that's come forward is one based on the cabinet with some consultation. Officers at all points, at all stages, have provided details. I think, in our defence, it's been a constantly moving picture over the last financial year. It wasn't clear until even a few months ago quite how large the budget gap was, because local government finance has become far more dependent on income and fluctuating amounts than it ever used to be traditionally. But yes, I mean, we as a cabinet will take ownership of the papers that have been put forward. We did, in our defence, have several seminars where we tried to keep it inclusive with members. Councillor Lanza has identified rightly that statutory services don't appear to have had some of the, or much of the reductions in discretionary areas. Well, statutory services, by their very nature, tend to have to be kept because they're providing something that we're required to, and it's been a longer process, I think, for officers to look through. And I think the next financial year will be an opportunity to check and to work through sort of more detailed proposals if there are any more savings to be delivered in that area. And I suspect there will be some, maybe not dramatic amounts, but I suspect there will be some. Councillor Lanza asked about the 185,000 reduction in neighbourhood services. That is predominantly staffing costs. It is anticipated that there'll be a reduction of one in each of the three major patch teams, and a slight restructure of two other posts to result in efficiencies for other parts of the of neighbourhood services. We believe, given the pressures on the council, that actually this is actually a relatively modest reduction, which will hopefully mean that we can protect and maintain most of the standards within neighbourhood services that we value here in Crawley, and we've tried to we've tried to do that. I would stress that it means that for the next year at least, we are still head and shoulders above other districts and boroughs in terms of what we actually provide, in terms of grass cutting, in terms of all the things that we want to keep our new town a tidy and attractive place, and we'll try to do what we can there. But obviously, we have another year with the inexorable pressures that we have there. In terms of the taxi increase, I mean, we've tried to set an increase in the licence fee, which is fair to levy given all the pressures on the trade. Councillor Lanza and his group are very welcome to suggest an alternative if that's what they wish to do. Indeed, I would say, Chair, we're now going through the proper scrutiny process, and we will have and no decision is final until the vote is taken at full council at the end of this month. So, if there is anything that's considered unsatisfactory, what I'd like to hear from the opposition isn't, "Oh, this will be very unpopular." I know that. What I want is suggestions of what you would have done instead. There's a chance here for councillors to offer budget amendments if that's what they wish to do. If they think there is an alternative, we will consider them, particularly if you can give us advance sight on them. Officers have been here previously. They will be here now to offer you any technical advice or financial guidance if that's what you wish. And the process is to be engaged with as it always is every year. I mean, Councillor Lanza will remember when I used to be on the county council. I used to take it as a matter of an honour that I would never sit there and just snipe in the sidelines and say, "Oh, I don't like that." I'd always try and attempt to deliver a proposal that actually tried to deliver that alternative, but actually demonstrated that it was possible. It wasn't just sort of opposition for the opposition's sake. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for those answers. I think I'd say to Councillor Jones, I reiterate the point I made earlier, that in terms of suggesting an alternative approach, it would be helpful if the opposition, and possibly, quite possibly, some Labour backbenchers actually had the opportunity to view those savings that had been rejected before they saw the light of day in the paper that we're discussing this evening. And in terms of the overall government funding, he mentioned it doesn't exactly bounce off the tongue, this extended producer responsibility for packaging grant, which sounds a bit precise, but it is worth £1.4 million. But it's worth noting in the report that there is still considerable uncertainty surrounding the value of this grant. And if it wasn't there, or if half of it wasn't there in reality, then of course I think we'd be seeing a reduction in central government funding. Thank you.
Just to come back on the extended producer responsibility, that figure is guaranteed, is the guidance I've been given. So that figure you can take to the bank, Councillor Lanza. Look, there's not some magic list that's been withheld from members. If people want to look through all our service areas and all the items line by line and suggest changes, they can do that. I mean, I would like to think that any of my colleagues on my side of in my group will have an opportunity to discuss these with the cabinet, and that will be. That will be inclusive. If Councillor Lanza is aware of any of my colleagues who are dissatisfied, please let me know, and I'll endeavour to do my best to put minds at rest. But I think we're in the process now, and you and your colleagues have every opportunity to raise those questions and seek those alternatives that you're asking for.
Finally, yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, Councillor Jones, that's an amusing notion, I think, that I should let you know if I meet any of your colleagues who are dissatisfied. Yeah.
Well, you're the one who referred to them, Councillor Lance, not me.
Yeah, why not? I was going to speak anyway. You won't be surprised to know. I think Councillor Hellier gets a bit annoyed with me speaking every meeting, but we are. I think we've got to get on with it and have our say. Where do I start? It's obviously really disappointing that we've got to make. Well, in the first instance, I'll say we still provided a quality service in a lot of key areas, and as a recently elected council who's come back after a long, long time, I'm still very proud of the services Crawley Borough Council provides. I think in all sorts of areas, I think we should be very proud of what we do. It's unfortunately because of what we mentioned about the cost of temporary accommodation, we've come to these unprecedented times. We've all been at the budget. I mean, Councillor Lowndes says there's been no budget working group, etc. But we've all been at the same seminar. We've all seen how at the budget seminar the finance settlement in 2012 was the council tax take has increased by about 25%, and you expect the settlement funding to increase by that amount as well. It's actually gone down from 7.8 to 4.2 last year. So that's the kind of problems we've got. It's quite interesting to speak about all these different funding areas. And when it comes to 6.1, I think we are, is it 6.1? Well, it'd be good to see a proper review of the funding formula for local government, because it's long overdue, because there's all these different pots of money and we need to do something about it. That's not really a question. I'm a bit surprised by the level of grant in terms of employers' national insurance, only because when I read the LGA magazine recently for January, it said the national settlement, they still foresaw a shortfall, because they said the cost to local government was 637 million, but the settlement from central government for that purpose was 515 million. Obviously still 80%. So I'm a little bit disappointed to hear we've only got 200,000. And obviously, we have been seeing assurances from the Deputy Prime Minister, etc., that has happened. So that must be something to do with the funding formula and perhaps how things are going forwards. But, never mind that. I think the important thing is that we are in a perfect storm of having to make very extreme expenditure cuts and trying to keep the level of services we're so proud of. And again, going back to the budget seminars we did have, I think some of the general decreases we've got to make in the budget is actually so unprecedented. It's equivalent to the last 5 or 6 years. That's how big. So that's how big they are, and we know why that is. It's partly because of the local government settlement over a long time, but it's down to the issues we've discussed, temporary accommodation. So it's really, as a backbench Labour member, it is disappointing, but I think we can understand why it's had to be done and how difficult it is for local government to come. I mean, one area, I was disappointed to hear about was obviously the outreach play service. I've been quite a champion of it, advertising there on the local Facebook, social media, local Facebook. It's done a really hard job under difficult circumstances. It was done on a shoestring, vehicles and staffing issues, etc. And I do really feel sorry for when we've had to reduce services such as that. But at the same time, I do understand why. And it's a really difficult thing to reconcile with, but I do understand why. And hopefully we can move through this and still provide a good service in other areas. Because in the end, it's, the non-statutory stuff is stuff we're not obliged to do, and they do. That's when we come knocking first of all. So I appreciate the hard work the officers have put in and the cabinet have put into this, and hopefully we can move on positively as well at the same time.
Thank you, Councillor Hilton. I mean, I would absolutely support a review of the funding formula. Now, in the government's defence, I actually think that one of the rationales behind local government reorganisation is that they think that some kind of restructuring might bring in sort of financial efficiencies that would assist local government, and that is part of that. We'll see on that, and I also agree that we probably need to look at the funding formula, just because inevitably, if particularly with the business rates reset, which we're expecting next year, I mean, it seems to me that it's all part and parcel of where money comes to local government, and there'll be no better time as far as I'm concerned. I too would have liked more on the national insurance front, but I mean, I think every council will undoubtedly think that. We're not, every council's probably been treated fairly equally as far as this is concerned, and I think he's right. Temporary accommodation is still the elephant in the room. If we didn't have these pressures, this council would not be in. We would not be here having these conversations. As simple as that. Just something that takes over a third of our revenue budget every year before a single bin's been emptied or a single blade of grass has been cut, or any of the other services that we actually do. That should be making people sit up and pay attention. I'll address the outreach place service. That was a very difficult decision, but effectively, when you've got a budget gap of £2.4 million, you really have to be you really have to make some very difficult decisions. We've reached a point where the council can't afford the revenue, but to mitigate that, we do have some capital, so we can increase the unsupervised play improvement programme to ensure that even if we don't have a supervised play programme, there is at least decent play equipment facilities in our neighbourhoods for our local kids. And if at the moment, I'd have to say, hand on heart, that's the best we can do. But we will do that, and we will try to mitigate in other ways as and when those opportunities come up. Clearly, we continue to support the third sector, and that is an important thing to be providing. And hopefully, some of that help and support means that we can be giving families some of that additional value that they might have been getting from the outreach place service.
Thank you. Just want to echo thanks to officers and Cabinet for all your work, given the really difficult financial situation that you set out and that we're facing. I've got a couple of questions just related to the public consultation. So paragraph 13 in the report recognises the need to consider the impact of the budget on people with different protected characteristics, and it says that will be done at the time that services are redesigned. I just wonder whether, as part of the consultation, we do undertake analysis of the data broken down by different protected characteristic, and I feel like if we had that information, we'd have a better understanding of sort of the importance that different groups place on our various services. So yeah, do we collect that as part of the survey, and if so, is that something that we could think of doing and sharing?
Thank you, Councillor. If I'm completely honest, I don't know. I would expect that we do. I would expect that it's fairly standard for local government consultations to ask some demographic information, but I'll go away and check. I guess what we're trying to say in here is actually the implications for. So the obligation we have in law is to ensure that we are considering the impact on people with a particular protected characteristic. I suppose what we're trying to say in this report is the budget in itself doesn't have that impact. It's how we deliver those services and how we deliver those changes that will. So when we do any kind of implementation, we have to consider that and make sure we're doing an equality impact assessment so that we are considering people with different protected characteristics. But on the specific questions we've asked on the survey, I can go away and find out and get back to you. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Just got two questions really about business rates and also the TA. Business rates, just want to clarify, at the moment, my understanding is for residential properties, the council charges potentially double council tax for any empty properties which landlords are not renting out. I wanted to know, with regards to business rates, is a similar policy applied to retail premises as well at the moment in Crawley? Secondly, with regards to TA, just wanted to find out how many TA suppliers do Crawley actually have on their books, and do we feel we're getting value for money from those providers? The capacity which we're looking at forecasting a greater need of having more TA, is that capacity available in Crawley with these providers, or do we need to get more providers to provide that? And what other options have you looked at to try and reduce these costs broadly? Thank you.
Yeah, just checking the business rates question. No, they don't double when they're empty. You get, I think it's 4 months, and then it's the full rate. It's not like council tax where we can charge premium.
I won't be able to give you as detailed an answer on the alternative providers for temporary accommodation within the borough as a housing officer would, or one of our strategic housing officers would. But I think when I answered Councillor Hilton's question earlier on, I laid out in quite some detail what is within our control and what isn't. I mean, you said what other providers could we be using? I think that indeed is the question. What other providers? I think that the demand's been so high and for so long that our housing officers have probably tapped out all the feasible providers there are in the borough. I mean, this is one of the reasons why we have to send quite a number of our households out of borough, because it simply is the fact that just there isn't necessarily the supply. I'm not sure if there are any other questions that we've missed, but that's what I think I can answer.
I was just saying, what other options have we actually reviewed to mitigate these costs? Because obviously it's growing. What actually have we done to try and get the costs down? Because obviously if this keeps going up and up, we're not going to be in a very good financial situation moving forward.
As I said earlier, the council and officers have tried to do everything to improve the efficiency in terms of acquiring temporary accommodation. Those sort of efficiencies that might bring down prices have largely been achieved. They do go for value for money. I mean, I know there are certain ceilings in terms of expenditure that they won't breach, because we have a duty to the taxpayer to deliver things within a certain amount. But as I said earlier on, not paying over the odds locally, all that work's largely been done as far as that's possible. But ultimately, if there's a shortage of supply, and demand, you get pressures which mean that you either pay more or you go out of borough while that's been undertaken. And I suppose one analogy to give you, Councillor Khan, is that think of a sink where where the tap is on, you can't turn the tap off and you can't pull the plug out. That's what we've got with temporary accommodation in Crawley, which is the pressure is there, and there's very little we can do to actually bring that down now, other than what we've already done. I mean, the officers might be able to go into more detail in terms of the very specific things that have been done to sort of ensure that we're maximising what we're able to claim that we're entitled to from the government, what we've done to ensure that we're getting the best value local accommodation. But I'm personally satisfied that that's that what can be done is being done.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I put it on. We will now consider the capital strategy report from Councillor Jones, Caroline and Vicky. Councillor Jones, would you introduce the report, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It's a statutory requirement for local authorities to prepare a capital strategy and have it approved alongside the budget at Council. It gives a high-level overview of how capital expenditure, capital finance and Treasury management activity will be undertaken, thereby putting a regulatory framework around capital decisions, setting out how the Council will determine capital spend and use capital resources to achieve the corporate objectives and support service delivery. It broadly follows the current approved strategy. However, the asset disposal section has been strengthened to put greater governance around disposal decisions should the Council pursue any disposals. It's a strategy document that is part of good governance supporting ongoing financial resilience. For full transparency, we're giving this its own report this year. I feel sure that either myself or officers will be able to assist members of the Commission if they have any questions relating to this.
Right, thank you for the report. I will now open it up to questions and discussion. Do any councillors have any questions, please? Some of the sections in the report refer to contract and lease negotiations. Details relating to these items cannot be discussed in open session. Thank you. Oh,
Question, but
Councillor Hilton.
just I'm pleased it's the first year we've had this. I'm just pleased about the transparency, particularly about things like the Corporate Asset Board. I'd heard of them on the QT in the past, but to see how the whole process works should be quite good. But how long we have all these things for as a local authority, who knows? But as long as we've got a proper system of deciding it and proper priorities, that's the way forward.
Thank you, Chair. I agree.
All committee members have had the opportunity to speak. So I would like to thank the officers for an interesting report. I move that the Commission notes the report and requests that reviews expressed during the debate are fed back to Cabinet through the Commission's comment sheet. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Barrett, thank you. Sorry, did you have your hand up?
No, sorry.
We now move on to the Treasury Management Strategy report from Councillor Jones and Caroline and Vicky. Councillor Jones, will you please introduce your report?
Thank you, Chair. The Treasury Management Strategy for the forthcoming year. The Council is required to have a Treasury Management Strategy approved for the year ahead. It broadly follows that approved last year, the current strategy. It underpins the Council's management of its cash, investments and borrowing to ensure that cash flow is adequately planned and available when needed. It includes a range of prudential indicators based on our spending plans, as detailed in the budget report, and how they'll be financed. It includes the minimum revenue provision policy statement, which documents how the Council will prudently pay down its debt each year. It also sets the limits of cash investments, we can invest with, and to what level to keep our cash safe. We prioritise security over liquidity and yield, and take a fairly low risk approach to managing our cash whilst trying to achieve high returns, which we have done so recently very well. We've assumed, Chair, a drop in interest rates, which together with the capital plans will make it very challenging to continue to generate the returns we've seen this year, even though we have a number of longer term deals locked in. One change to report is regarding the approved counterparties. We've reduced the time limit for money invested out down to 3 years on the advice of Arling Close, the Council's Treasury advisors. Previously, this was 25 to 50 years for the government, local authorities and other secured investments. This is just to be prudent, as we would have been unlikely to have gone beyond those sorts of time limits anyway. Thank you.
Thank you for the report. I will now open it up to questions and a discussion. Do any councillors have any questions, please? Councillor Lanza.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. On page 104, paragraph 5.2.3, we see an increase in the capital funding requirement from £255 million in 2023-24 to a projection of £273 million in financial year 2027-2028. Is this kind of depicting an increase in capital expenditure, which at this point in time is not fully funded from council resources? That's the question. Then on page 108, and that's paragraph 6.1, there's a reference to some Treasury management objectives here, and the council works to strike a balance between cheap short-term loans currently available at around 5.4% and long-term fixed-rate ones where the future cost is known but currently higher. That's 4.62 to 5.3%. It's just an observation, and I don't know if it's a typo, it might not be, but the percentages don't match the text, if you see what I mean, because in this example, it's the long-term fixed-rate loans that are cheaper than the short-term loans, whereas the text is making the opposite point, I think you will find. And on page 119, if I just get there myself, paragraph 7.2.1, we've got the ethical investment policy, and I just want to draw your attention to another government document published in December. It didn't receive the same publicity as local government devolution and reorganisation. It's only just in December, I think it was the 2nd of December, and it's the Defence Industrial Strategy, and it's got some strategic aims, and I'll read one of them to you. We want to establish a mission-driven defence industrial strategy that ensures defence contributes fully to the government's #1 mission to drive UK economic growth. Now that's a commendable aim in a dangerous world. So why is it that when we look at our ethical investment policy, which prohibits investment with organisations that make weapon systems, why is it that in such an uncertain and increasingly dangerous world, your ethical investment policy sets itself totally against the government's laudable defence industrial strategy.
I'll leave the technical answers to the officers, but I will address the ethical investment policy. You say your ethical investment policy, Bob. I like to think it's ours because it's the council's, and we're all the one council. So, and I suppose the answer is that our ethical investment policy was set some years ago, and and this strategy that's come forward from the government came forward on the 2nd of December. We can look at that, but a national defence strategy isn't necessarily predicated on one individual local authority's investment decisions, I suppose is the short answer.
Yes, thank you for your observations. And yes, your first point about the increase in the forecast in our capital financing requirement is due to the fact that resources are being used up, so we will have to turn to borrowing as funding sort of disappears. So that one is right. And then the other point on the percentages for the loans, yes, my apologies, that looks like it probably is a typo, so I'll have a look at those and come back to you, just double check the rates on that. And yes, just going back to the ethical question, within the Treasury management, it always has to be security, liquidity, yield, and then ethical is always the last.
Has anyone else got a question? Nick?
Why not? I'm just pleased that instead of discussing some of our, like some councils of different hues, I would say, in Sussex, where they've had investment issues and they've taken some risk on their loans from public works, loan boards, etc. I'm just glad we've got a nice risk-averse policy and that we can discuss the ethical side of investment rather than other issues we may have. And so long may it continue. I think the people who do the investments on our behalf, we get a good return, and it's nice and risk averse, which suits my personality actually.
Yeah, I'd just like to echo what Councillor Hilton said. It's been somebody recently elected and coming into looking at local authority finance. It's actually been quite a pleasure to see the diligence with which the investments are discussed and presented to councillors, and the way in which the prudent approach has generated income and support for the council. So I'd like to thank the officers and congratulate them on a good job well done so far. So thank you.
Can I just agree, Chair, that I think it's wonderful that we've been able to attain what I consider superlative rates of return in the last couple of years, and being able to combine it with an ethical policy that allows us to assure ourselves that we're investing in the right things. There is no shortage of money out there in the world, and investors who will invest in some of these areas such as the defence industry that Councillor Lanza refers to. But we have a duty as local council, I think, to invest in what we consider appropriate and what we think our residents would want us to. And so we try and do that judiciously.
Thank you. All committee members have had the opportunity to speak, so I'd like to thank the officers for an interesting report. I move that the Commission notes the report and requests the views expressed during the debate are fed back to Cabinet through the Commission's comment sheet. I'd like a seconder, please. Councillor Hart. I was making sure there wasn't one this side first. Okay, thank you. Right. We now move on to item 9, forthcoming discussion list. That is the next thing, isn't it? I just got the feeling it wasn't. Right. The forthcoming discussion list is featured on your agenda and also on the council's website. I will ask Heather to now list those that have been referred.
Lovely. Thank you, Chair. There are four reports currently heading to Cabinet on the 12th of March, which is OSC on the 10th of March. These do slightly differ from what you have on your printed agenda copy. The Housing Revenue Account Business Plan has been deferred. So the reports currently listed are the review of the Crawley Borough Council national and local list of validation requirements. This report seeks approval for an updated list following the adoption of the Crawley Borough Local Plan of national and local validation requirements required for the registration of applications submitted to the local planning authority. We also have, as you can see on the agenda, another tranche of housing policies. These will be housing policy for repairs and maintenance, and also slightly different will be the housing compliance policies for fire safety hostels, fire safety shelter scheme and personal mobility devices. And the last one is the food waste vehicle procurement. So this is purely the procurement for the food waste trucks. Can you let me know if you wish any of these reports to be referred, and also let me know why, please?
At risk of revealing a degree of naivety, could you tell us a little bit more about the review of the Crawley Borough Council National and Local List of Validation Requirements, what that is?
The only thing I know is what I took off the forward plan form that's on the intranet and the website, which is it's going to seek, literally, it's going to seek approval for the updated list following the adoption of the Crawley Local Plan. So it is literally the list of national and local validation requirements for the registration of applications. And that's only what's on the intranet.
Should I? Thank you, Chair. Yes. So thanks, Councillor Russell. I probably can't give you a lot more, but I have seen the draft report. It's a technical report. So it's when people are when there's planning applications and so on. It's a technical report that sets out the things that we need in order to validate planning applications. But it's a policy which therefore needs to go to Cabinet for approval. But it's a sort of technical planning document that sets out all of our requirements in the planning process.
Is there much planned for next committee? Is there? Oh, we might as well have all those then. No, we have some. We are an OSC. We are meant to scrutinise.
Only if it will add value. When you go through the list, you need to provide officers with reasons where you will add value, where the Commission will add value. Will it be a good use of the Commission's time, and why you would like the reports referred?
Well,
so out of those four, which would the
five.
Commission like? 4. If any, by the way.
Okay. I would like to look at 3 and 4. I think housing is a very big aspect of what we provide as a borough council, and I think having oversight and a review, the opportunity to look at those two would be something that I would hope we could add value to. And 5, I think it would be good for us to have an understanding on the processes. I mean, as a commission, we've invested time with a subcommittee looking at proposals, but to broaden our depth of our understanding of the way ahead, particularly with food waste, I think would be of value as well.
I would just say on that, it's might not be process, it's procurement. But if the Commission still want it, you can refer it.
for me, the procurement would actually indicate part of the processes that are going on and help inform us and any questions our residents may have.
So to clarify, both housing policies, and you want the food waste vehicle procurement.
A suggestion, obviously, to the committee.
I second that suggestion. I assume we'll be invited in the Cabinet Member for Housing.
I will go through the list because it usually ties in with whichever reports are being considered. So I will go back through and have a look. But yeah, maybe Cabinet Member for Environment.
Environment.
Only because it ties in.
Got the food waste, environment.
It would be environment, but I will have a look and go back through. But yes, we would usually tie it in with the report that happens to be referred at the time.
Just